Welcome back. And now the SAA-Takatso deal has been a turbulent one. Parliament's legal advisors have found nothing untoward in the deal between the Department of Public Enterprises and the Takatso consortium. But the deal is currently being renegotiated and is yet to take off. An aviation analyst, Guy Leitch, joins us with his assessment of the dynamics playing out in the deal-making scene and what it could mean for the national carrier and the broader local aviation landscape. Guy, a pleasure. Good evening to you. Good afternoon. Guy, maybe we can start. Yes, I think we can maybe start off by seeing, we see SAA, it's flying its back in the skies to whatever degree that has been. But how has that reintroduction of SAA been for our aviation sector, for competition within the carriers? Has it been the market moving kind of a decision or, play out as we thought?
Yeah, the arrival of SAA has, by and large, been a good thing for the market. The most important single point is whether the airline is being subsidized by the government and is therefore competing unfairly with the purely private sector carriers. The claims for that have been almost non-existent and certainly very muted. In fact, there are more accusations being leveled against FlySAF right now about undercutting real prices than against SAA. And I need to just make the broad statement that all airline connectivity is to be welcomed because it has an enormous multiplier effect to the broader economy. And yes, SAA is leading the way in terms of reopening routes to key destinations, particularly in West Africa, like Accra and Ghana and so on. And it is pushing as hard as it can to open up the long-haul international routes again. Again, by and large, that is to be welcomed. The key point, though, is at what cost. Yeah. And the airline finds itself in a very difficult position right now because the whole launch of SAA version 2 was pretty much predicated on the successful completion of a strategic equity partnership deal, whereby a majority shareholding, 51%, of the airline would be sold to a private sector consortium. When the Takatso consortium was announced, most commentators, myself included, thought it was a good idea. It brought together much needed capital and skills. Well, the skills part has now left the deal because it was forced out by the Competition Commission. That leaves the much awaited capital. The airline is now operating in a very undercapitalized state, and it is finding it very difficult, if not quite frankly impossible, to replace its fleet, to update its fleet. It's operating obsolete 22-year-old aircraft on the Perth route now, for instance, so it can't compete there and is going to start losing money in a big way. The airline is ambivalent, or let me say ambiguous, about whether it's actually losing money or not. Some reports say it's lost 776 million in 9 months. Professor John Lamoda, the acting CEO, says that statement is in fact not true, that they actually will operate profitably in 2023. So we don't know actually whether the airline is operating profitably or not, but it does need the consortium, the Takatso consortium, or some other similar equity partner if it is going to fly, for the medium to long term.
I must ask you, Guy, up to this point, where does the balance sheet sit here? Who has a custodian over that balance sheet, considering the fact that, as you say, the strategic equity partnership deal was very, very important. And there's been quite a bit of, a controversy around that. We haven't been able to really conclude it the way that we had hoped. I think it's been 3 years already since the initial announcement. Where does the balance sheet sit here? So the question is, when we see money leaving, when we see the carrier being run, who's funding that?
That's an extremely good question. Right now, the airline remains 100% owned by the state, by the government, if you like, as a state-owned enterprise. And yet, Pravin Gordhan, the minister in charge of state-owned enterprises, has resolutely stated that there will be no further bailouts or funding or guarantees for SAA. And that's one of the reasons why it finds itself in a particularly difficult position, because it doesn't now have the depth of finances to be able to acquire new aircraft, to expand into new routes, and so on. It remains absolutely key that they'd be able to attract the right staff too. And as long as the Takatso deal is hanging in the air, as it were, then people don't really know where they stand. We've got an acting board, we've got an acting CEO. A lot of key positions are not being filled. So management is got huge gaps in it. We've already seen that in the Auditor General's report, pointing out that they're going to give not even a qualified financial audit on the airline because it simply doesn't have the manpower to put the necessary controls in place. The airline currently finds itself in a kind of limbo at this stage, and this deal needs to be landed one way or another.
I'll also ask you then, if we just take a step back here and look at this SAA 2.0 that we're trying to really put together here, and I think, as you've mentioned, Guy, we welcome SAA, being in flight, and the multiplier effect there, the real benefits to the greater South African economy. But at this point, Guy, what do we need? What could possibly happen in the short to medium term to see this all coming to fruition? It has been 3 years. It seems like we've wasted a lot of time, and most importantly, we've wasted a lot of money.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with the wasted a lot of money part, but certainly we wasted an inexcusable amount of time. There were a whole lot of steps required to make the deal happen, and most of them could have happened concurrently. They could have been applying for licenses at the same time as they went to the Competition Commission. They could have been getting approval from Takatso, checking out the finances. And they needed to change the Act of Parliament. Most of these things could have happened simultaneously. Instead, they've been doing them step by step by step, consecutively. That has added enormously to the time requirement. And in my opinion, we're still at least 18 months, probably 2 years away from completing the deal just in terms of the legal hurdles.
Wow.
So it's not, while the government has pretty much been good in not applying any additional funds to it, other than the 1 billion rand, which was allocated in the current budget. But that was in fact to already allocated business rescue bailouts or funding. So it hasn't really used new funds at this stage. But the reality is that if this thing is not sorted out soon, the airline is going to start costing us taxpayers big money again. Nothing burns cash quite as fast as an airline.
Well, Guy, it's been a pleasure hearing from you today. Thank you so much for unpacking this for us. And hopefully next time we speak about SAA, we can have a better conversation. Thank you so much. That was aviation analyst Guy Leitch.